You are unmuted now, ladies. So Kim, if you want to start, go ahead.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Roots to Harvest Kitchen. I am joined today by Diana Buckus. Many of us have called the Canadian Queen over the years, at least in the last 20 years of my career. I've often turned to her, as do many others, for questions about preserving food. Today we are going to walk through 3 different things. There are lots of other ways to preserve food that we are not going to talk about today. If there is a lot more interest, maybe we can convince Rachel to help us plan one more of these workshops, and we can talk about other things. But today we're going to go through, we're going to talk about freezing, we're going to talk about drying food. Diana's going to do some pickling. You can see all these things set up. Maybe you can see our chopped up cucumbers here, and the dill, and then we're going to do some pickling with you. And then finally you'll get to see a jam workshop that Rachel and I recorded on Tuesday where we made some strawberry jam. So that's our plan for today, and welcome to Diana. Thank you for coming in to visit with me, sporting that beautiful apron as well.
Thank you.
So we're waiting for the brine. So one of the things with pickling is to get your water and your vinegar and your salt going. So while we wait for that brine, we're going to talk a little bit about freezing food. Freezing food is, I want to say it's the lazy woman's version, because that's the way that I like to do food a lot. And there are lots of different foods, fruits and vegetables that come from your garden that if you have the freezer space, it's easy, you can put it away. And then in the middle of the winter, you can pull out these beautiful fresh vegetables that you put away for later. So I've got some examples of things that we've frozen here, just to show you different ways that things can be frozen. So if you're like everyone else in the world right now, you have either too many zucchinis growing in your garden or your neighbors are trying to pawn off their zucchinis on you. So if you come to my office here, I'll be happy to pawn one off on you, and you can practice this skill too, which is just using our food processor or a cheese grater to grate up your zucchini and freeze it. So we freeze it in 8-cup measures because we make a lot of muffins in here for hampers that we're providing. And then we just lay it nice and flat, and they stack really well in your freezer. So that's one of the things that we do. Another thing I have, so rhubarb is a very short season. It's the first thing that comes out. You might not be ready for all of it at once. So we wash it and chop it up into nice little chunks, and then you can do lots of things with it. Later on in the season, you can add it into cakes. I like to boil mine down and make like a rhubarb syrup, a simple syrup that I add to my bubbly water. So that's something you can do. But also in here, we make muffins with it, because we do a lot of muffin making around here. Now, the last thing that I want to show you are vegetables. So these are wax beans, the yellow beans that we grew in the garden here at Roots to Harvest last year. So for these first 2 things, I don't blanch them. But when you think about freezing vegetables, what happens when we pick them right from the garden is the enzymes in them will continue to ripen the vegetable, and you don't want it to get overripe. So one of the things that we do is we blanch them, which means you wash them first, you prep them. I've chopped these because I like them to be all ready to go into whatever soup or thing that I'm preparing. And then you boil some water, and then you blanch them for somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes usually, and then it will depend on the size of the vegetable that you're doing. So a larger vegetable will need a little extra blanching. And there are lots of good resources for how long you should blanch. Luckily, most of us have the internet, so you can Google that. When I first learned, I had a book that I learned to do it with. And so blanching those and freezing them is a great way to preserve vegetables for the winter. Dan, did you do tricks on freezing things?
I don't freeze much. As Kim knows, I put most of my stuff in the jar.
Yeah.
I am one of the few people that do that.
That's why I'm talking about it, because it's the lazy woman's way. Diana's the expert on the canning,
So most of my vegetables go into jars. So Kim talks about beans in the freezer. I'll talk about beans in a jar that you need a pressure pan. So we'll talk about a pressure pan a little bit more. The reason why we chose to go with jars is because in a jar we can last 2, 3, 4 years. But we freeze it
about 6 months.
about 6 months. And that was our choice to why we got it within the jar. Even this is really good. This is all leftover vegetables at the end of the season. Put it in the jar.
Yes.
So I'm sorry to keep it going.
That's great. That's why you're here to give all the tips about the things that I don't know. So blanching, I forgot to say that you boil them for a certain number of minutes. You should look that up. And then the next thing you want to do is immediately cool it. So getting a bowl with some ice water and then immediately cooling them. I really like to have a basket for the boiling. So don't even have boiling water, grab the basket out. I meant to have that out on the table today. And then plunging them into some cold water, and then you freeze them. So I missed that step, but I looked down at my notes while I was asking Diana, so that was perfect timing for me to go. The next thing we wanted to talk about is drying, and Diana does do lots of food drying in her house. Do you want to tell us about a couple of examples that you brought?
When I said, I have a dehydrator, and yes, I do a lot of drying my dehydrator 24 hours a day for about 4 months. And that tells you how much drying I do. So I brought Kim and Rachel a bag that I was done. Got to dried apples, got to dried strawberries, I've got dried organic apricots, I've got dried organic cherries. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
It's so high stuff right now. That's okay. You can't taste them at home anyways.
Yeah.
Rachel and I will get into that.
So anyways, I do a phenomenal amount of dry. Our family, rather than going out and buying fresh fruit all winter, we eat mostly dried fruit. But one of the things we're really popular with is I make a phenomenal amount of fruit leather. So I have yellow raspberry, red raspberry, strawberry rhubarb, I have coconut. So I do a lot of leather. And so again, without going to buy food in the grocery store through the winter, we just pull out the dried fruit. That's an option that we have decided, and Kim's going to show you.
Also here at Roots to Harvest, we have an Excalibur dehydrator. Not all of you will have that at home, but when you're doing it on the scale like Diana is, and like we are, last year we had to borrow a dehydrator at peak season just to add the volume that we needed. So a dehydrator like this, with this extra, we have an extra sheet that you can easily pour liquids on. So this will come out of your food processor and whatever mix and match of fruits that you like. One of Diana's tricks she taught me this year was a little bit of coconut in there. A little desiccated coconut makes it really pop that flavor too.
Yeah, that's true. For apple and that I use a lot of coconut. Yeah. And also what I also do is if I have an abundance of say some oranges and I didn't need, I'll use some oranges, coconut, pineapple, I'll get some pineapple.
The pineapple and coconut combination is killer. So I recommend that for sure.
Can I throw in a question?
Yes.
Are you using coconut already dried or fresh,
Yes.
or what kind of coconut?
Dried.
Already dried.
Dried
Okay.
coconut.
That's
Yes. Yes, and watch out how much you put in too, because it'll overpower your flavor.
So what if they don't have a dehydrator at home?
I have heard of people using the oven method. I've never used the oven method, but I do hear people using that. And for your herbs and that, most people just take them and they hang them upside down and dry them out.
So take them by the stems, put a little string on them. You can hang them in a nice dry, well-aired, lots of airflow in that space, and they'll dry just like that. If you don't have cats, they probably won't attack them. So depending on how, I don't know, in my house there are cats and they mess with things. We also have some examples here of things that we dried in the Roots to Harvest kitchen. So I have mint. Mint grows, as you know, like a weed. It will take over whatever space, but it provides a lot of good stuff for the rest of the season. So if you don't have a chance to use it fresh, we dehydrate it and we use it for tea. And we sell it here in our storefront for tea. We also have some pretty little chamomile flowers, which I think are pretty, so I thought I would show you those. Another great resource for tea. Diana has brought in some dehydrated dill. So we do that with most of your herbs are really great dehydrated. I know here at Roots we have our parsley, our thyme that's dehydrated. We always have dill as well for the season. What else is really good dehydrated? Everything except for cilantro, I feel like. Dehydrates well.
I can show you, I dehydrate half the onions I drop. Sometimes it won't store well, so I do that. I do beets, I do cucumbers, I do carrots. And that is, so in the winter, when I want to make a soup, it's just take a little bit out of this jar, a little bit out of that jar, take a little bit out of every jar.
No cutting or anything. Think of it, you've done all of the work in the fall, and then you just make it really easy for yourself later on.
Yeah, I will tell you, dehydrated cucumbers, use young ones and peel them. Otherwise, they're pretty bitter, but they're wonderful in the summer. I dehydrate oranges, kiwis, anything that's I can get at a reasonable price.
And peak season is here, right? That's the time to buy your fruit. And if you don't have a dehydrator, maybe your neighbor does, keep an eye out on yard sales. I find some of the best places I find things for people that used to can. I found them at yard, actually that's not true. My mother found them at yard sales and bought them for me. She was the queen of the yard sale, so I'm really grateful for that. And some people use the sun. There's use the sun, right? If you think of sun-dried tomatoes, you have those on the shelf. I forgot to bring them down, but sun-dried tomatoes is another thing that people use for dehydrating, just like they use hanging for the oven for a dehydrator. So you can experiment with that too. If you have a good space and some good sunshine, making sure that you have, some people have used old screen doors, you know, washed up the screen door. It's got lots of good aeration, and setting it out in the sun for however long it needs to be. How do you know when it's done?
If you buy one of the newer ones, they'll tell you what temperature to put it at in the lamp. Mine is one of the older ones. Mine just sits at the same temperature, and I just know that this takes this long time and that. But for onions, and like I just did some peaches, the way I knew they were dried is I just took one out, turned it over, and it was not tacky anymore.
Just be a little bit crunchy, you say? Like, not to the crunchy stage.
No, not to the crunchy stage. Because if you get to the crunchy stage, it starts to brittle. It's too brittle.
Yeah. So that's how I like the apples.
Oh,
a little bit of crunch. It just depends. So do it to your own, but if they have too much moisture in it, it will not store very well.
No.
So that was kind of.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. So if you're making something you're not sure, then take what's on that and flip it over. So now the bottom side will dry just as well as the top side. Because your top side will always dry first.
Great. Good tips. Rachel, are there any questions on the freezing and the drying from your chat board before we move on to some pickling?
Not yet, but if anyone has a question right now on that topic, go ahead and add it to the chat and I'll take a look.
One of the things I will recommend is if you are really thinking of getting into drying, like Kim said, she bought the Excalibur. I recommend the Excalibur. Mine is a different one. Mine is more semi-commercial. But the Excalibur makes a good one. I guess it is a lot of money at the beginning, but really to get into drying that, it pays for itself about 2 years. So just think that it'll last, like my dehydrator now is going on 35 years old. And so you can't get your money out. And I have seen some of the newer ones.
Yeah, there are lots of price options, right? Like there are lower price options. The ones we have is a bit of a lower price option at the moment. But you can get them, you know, from $300 up to $1,000. So you can do a little bit of research on that.
And I'll give you a really good tip. Don't go to Canadian Tire and buy one of theirs. You're wasting your money. But the other thing I want to say is Kim showed you these are Teflon sheets. And if you do want to do like use spaghetti sauce, all that, anything with liquid, you do need this. And also you need this to even dry strawberries. It adds moisture.
Yeah.
So you do need this.
We've been drying calendula flowers here because you can use them for tea in the garden, and they fall through so it's nice to have something that doesn't fall through. Yeah, it's going to dehydrate and be very small. It's great. Great.
So if you're buying a dehydrator, even though I call them Teflon sheets are an extra price, they're well worth it. Absolutely well worth it.
Any couple questions?
If you're gonna shred your zucchini, before you freeze it, do you need to remove the seeds first, or can you just shred up the seeds?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially if they're really big. Like you should see some of the ones I have in the fridge right now, right? 2 to 3 people. You don't want those great big seeds in there. So just slice it down the middle, scoop it out, and grate it. I don't peel any of that zucchini. It's not like the cucumber that the peel is a little bit bitter. So yeah, and all the different kinds. So yellow, or striped, they're all good enough chocolate zucchini bread.
And on the same note that Kim's saying about freezing, if she has 8 cups in that bag, when you pull the thawed out, you put it in a bowl, all the water is going to come out of the bag. When you make your recipe, put everything back into the recipe because the water came out of the zucchini. And so you should, even though you're going to be scared to do it, put it all back in because it came from the zucchini. Otherwise, you're going to end up with some pretty dry muffins or cakes.
You're going to need more eggs and butter.
Yeah, so
one or the other, right?
Yeah, so I always just pour all the liquid when it's thawed out.
Beautiful.
You want to tell us about this fancy orange thing before we move on to pickling?
Yeah, this is a tool that I've used for well over 40 years. Not this one in particular, but I have them at home. I love this tool. I do what Kim's mom did. I go to the secondhand store. I always buy them. They're in the box that's behind you. Right there, the yellow box. Yeah. Okay, so I love this. Here, I'll show you the box. I love this. I'm not pushing this. But you can get it in the secondhand store for $3.99. And so every time I see one, I just pick it up. And when somebody starts canning, I just say, hey, would you like a slicer? And they always say yes. I bet you I've given away a dozen of these. So I like them because I do all my sauerkraut, I do all my relishes, I do everything with this little slicer. I just love it. And so I asked him if I could.
Watch your fingers.
Watch your fingers, use the cap. Okay. And yes, you probably will cut your finger once, and that's it. Yeah, but I do use this quite a bit. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I'll do that again. So I'm going to just be Diana's assistant now with whatever she needs. We're going to turn over to pickling cucumbers. So we have pickling cucumbers in the garden at Roots Harvest. So these were harvested this morning. Nothing better than fresh produce, putting it right away. We also have dill that was harvested in the garden and some garlic. In the pot that you see beside Diana is the brine. And she's going to tell us about what she uses for her brine.
Okay, so my brine is 13 cups of water, 3 cups of vinegar, and 1 cup of pickling salt. And something I like to teach people who are first learning how to can, don't drop your salt in your brine before it's heated up. Because what happens when you put it in there, it goes to the bottom, and you forget to stir it, it burns. So I also say that when you're going to can or preserve fruit, and that's called the syrup. And I always say the same thing. Always get your water boiling, then add your sugar. So then it melts right away, rather than sitting at the bottom of your pot and burning. So we've already put in the 13 cups of water. We put in the 3 cups of vinegar. Now, a lot of you are seeing pickling vinegar. There's 2 types, a regular vinegar, which is 5%, and then you're seeing what's called pickling vinegar, which is 7%. So I spent a whole year researching these 2 vinegars. Yeah, I wrote to the companies, I wrote to the people who made books and all that kind of stuff, and I asked them, because we all learned to use the regular vinegar. And so the 7% canning vinegar is just the way for you to spend more money on a vinegar that you don't need. Because almost all recipes all want 5%. But if you come to a recipe that does say use pickling vinegar, then I recommend you do. But otherwise, come to a recipe and it just says vinegar, go out there and buy the 5% regular white vinegar. Now, the only time I don't use my regular white vinegar is when I do pickle feet. Then I use apple cider vinegar. And it just has a beautiful flavor. So I do use apple cider with the pickled beets.
And that sugar that you just added?
No, that's the salt.
Oh, that's the salt.
1 cup of salt. So there's 13 cups of water, 3 cups of vinegar, and 1 cup of salt now. So you should always bring your brine and your syrup to a full boil. And then that way you know that anything you put in there that was dry will dissolve.
It's already gone.
Okay, it's gone. Kim just told me. So we're going to do dill pickles. Now, unfortunately, when Kim got her cucumbers, some of them were this long. And that is not a dill-sized cucumber. So Kim and I took them and we sliced them into thick round wedges. And it'll work. You just make do with what you have. So we do have some small ones. She was able to get some small ones, so we do have some small ones. So I am going to do a jar with the small ones, and then I will show you a jar with the sliced ones. Okay? So Kim,
Sure. So one of the things that you need to do before you use your canning jars is to help prevent contamination. You want them to be nice and clean. So these jars were washed in hot soapy water first. Here in our commercial kitchen, we are lucky enough to have a commercial sanitizer. So at home, most of you won't have access to that. So you need to sanitize your jars in 1 of 2 ways. So the way that's recommended by Public Health and Bernardine, who we often go to for some of the recommendations around home preserving. Bernardine makes many of the canning jars that you might buy, and they are sort of our experts when it comes to that. Is to boil water and submerge the jars in that water to sanitize everything on the outside of them for 10 minutes, and then to grab them as you go and to add your liquid in. And then Diana has a way that she's been doing over the course of her life. Can you tell us about that?
Because it's so hot in the summer, I got away from using the hot water bath. I wash mine, like Kim said, with soap and water and that, and then I rinse them really well. And then I have commercial cookie sheets, and I put all mine on the commercial cookie sheet. They go in the oven at 225, and they sit there for about 10 minutes, and they are sterilized.
And that's a fine method for you to use at home, but if you're trying to sell your canning goods in the community, then you need to follow your public health recommendations.
That is.
Or we recommend you do.
Yes.
Well, like you're selling.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do 1 jar with the small pickles. So Kim has given me what is called a wide mouth jar. So for me to do a pint, so you can see this is a dill head.
Pint is 500 mils.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
For those of us who are in the metric system.
Sorry.
Correct. Just me, I understand what that means.
Yes. So I put in half of a head of dill, and then when
And it's the flowering head. So
That's
those two-
right.
And she's got both here. So you can see there's the green part of the dill that we use for cutting up and cooking or dehydrating like you showed before.
that's correct.
But you want to wait until you get the flowering heads because that's the part that has the seed that gives it the flavor.
Yes, it's got the most flavor in it. So then again, because I'm using 500 mils, I put in a half of a clove of garlic, not a whole one. I like cutting my garlic because I put a half on the bottom, a half on the top, and I find that gives a much better flavor. So I'm going to put the 2 in here. Unfortunately, we do not have any dill pickling spice, which I do use. I buy it in bulk. So we're going to use not quite a 1/4 teaspoon of, Kim was able to find some dried red peppers. So when I do mine at home, I have the full red pepper. I cut it in half. And in a quart, I would use a half. In a pint, I would just use a 1/4 of that. Okay? So I want to show you a really neat trick. Most people, when they fill their jars, they hold it like this and they start shoving these things in. Now you have to realize most times when you're using these, the jar is hot. So this is a trick that one of the Finn ladies taught me. So you take it, you put it on its side, literally put it on its side, and then start, oh, sorry, okay. So then you start putting them in on the side, and then that way they're not moving around, they're not falling anywhere. So this is a big ugly one, so you stick it in the middle, so you can't see it after. So then you just keep, it's gonna taste, yeah. So then you put them on the side, and then once it's stabilized, then you just stand it up on the side, and they're not falling on each other. So this guy's a little guy, so he's gonna go down the middle. Okay, so then this is where I would take another half a clove of garlic, I'd throw it in there. I would take a whisk, I call them whisks, but I'm sure they have another name, and I would put it on top. Then I would take some more small ones, and I would put them in. So you don't want to come up much past the bottom ring. As you can see, I'm forcing them in because once they do go with the brine, they will shrink, okay? So then Kim has a spoon here and a funnel for me. So then all I do is take this, take the funnel, I take the ladle. Now, again, because I do so much canning, all my ladles at home are certain sizes. And I know I have half cups, I have 1/4 cups, I have full cups, and I know exactly how many scoops I need for every jar. Now, here's a really important thing to get your jar to seal, okay? You must always clean the rim because there could be a speck of salt on there, there could be a speck of sugar on there, there could be a speck of anything. So usually I dip it into the boiling hot water, I go around the rim. Kim is gonna give me a disc. So this is a disc, and I'm not going to touch the rubber because the oil from my hand could stop the seal. So I just put it on like that. Kim's going to give me a ring. I'm going to put it on like this. Now, part of the secret to canning is you do not go like tight. You just put it on fingertip tight. And the reason why is when you put it back into the hot water bath, if you choose to do that, the air has to come out for it to seal. Okay? So that is how we've got one really nice jar of dill pickles.
You can take it up after, you can take it completely off.
That's
right. Reuse your ring.
So if you look at all my jars that I brought, you will not see any rings on my jars. Once your jar has sealed, you no longer need the ring. So like Kim said, You can keep using the same rings and not go out by whatever the cost is. I would like to talk, if I have a minute, about a pressure canner because I am really a big pressure canner, but I keep the same ring for the pressure canner because the pressure canner will leave the rings. So because we had these really big cubes, cucumbers, we are going to use them up. So you set them up. So you just have to learn how to make you what you have. So I'm gonna add some of that, but a little bit, not enough jelly. So that. So all I'm gonna do is put these in here. I'm going to try to not just throw them in because if you throw them in, you've got too much airspace. Kim, could I have a knife, please? Sure. Yeah, a bread knife, you know, like a bread and butter knife. Okay. So there I am. There he is. And being who I am, I try to squeeze in the extra one because there you go. More the merrier. I put the whisk in like that, and then I put a half a garlic in, put my funnel on it, and make sure my whisk, I don't know, dill weed, I guess. Dill weed is below. Okay, so then and my water is still boiling down below. It's not a hard boiling boil, but it is hot, and it is still boiling.
The other thing we forgot to mention is these lids. So you'll notice that I'm pulling them out of water in a pot. We warmed up the lid. So it is recommended that you don't boil them. It used to be recommended that you boil them. But in an effort to keep this rubber seal from degrading, we don't want to spend too much time in the hot water.
So, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. So these are sliced. So there's a lot of airspace in there. So usually what I do is I take a bread knife and I wiggle it. I wiggle it in there like this. I just wiggle it because if there's a big air bubble in there, at least then it'll go down and then I can see, oh, geez, I need to put some more brine or I need to put some more sugar in. And if you notice, when I did put this down, I put it the metal side down. So I'm wiping this, putting this on, taking the lid from Kim and putting it on, fingertip tight. Okay? So do you want to do one more, Kim?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do one more.
One more.
Okay, so there you go. I'm going to do this, put the head in. So this head is way too big for a pint, so I just break it up, put that in, grab garlic, put that in. Once again, I'm a firm believer of pickling spice, so I do most of mine in pickling spice.
So pickling spice has mustard seed usually, has a little bit of heat, so we've added a little bit of red pepper. If you don't like the heat, you can avoid that. We're just doing it for fun here.
Cut up bay leaves, celery seeds. It all depends who you get the mixture you get it from. Every mixture seems to be different. So,
And you can look up making your own from those ingredients, if those are ingredients that you keep in your house all the time, or you can buy a ready-made.
that's correct. So one of the questions that we were asked is, how do you get your jar to seal? So one of them is to make sure that your rim of your jar is always really, really clear. What has happened is all the companies that make the disc, which Kim hasn't had, have gone to a much cheaper rubber. So again, I had to research that because every time I did that, they would always open. So I wrote to all the companies to find out why, and they told me the formula for the rubber had changed, and basically it's just not as good as it used to be anymore. So so always do your ring. I can't stress that enough. Get your lid, and also make sure your lid or your disc, this is called the disc, make sure your disc is warm. Not, you go in there and you find out your water is too cold, then put it back on the stove and redo it. Now, Kim, do you want?
That'll help with the vacuum seal. That's what Diana's
right.
getting at. So we want, it's important, temperature is important in this case. Now would you boiling water bath candy after, or no?
You can talk about boiling hot water bath.
You don't do that normally for pickles?
No, I don't do it. Again, I'm an oven person, but I learned from the homesteaders, the Finlander homesteaders, and what they would do is they would take these, and they have all the old flannel sheets. They'd have a flannel sheet on the counter. They put all the jars on it. They shove a flannel sheet on top. That's it. Yeah, it shows over, right?
Well, that was one of the questions that came across, was around fermenting as well. That makes me think of fermented pickles.
Yes.
So I don't know, is that something that you've ever done?
Thanks, Kim. That's okay. So I've got this jar right here, okay, and I want it to seal. Now, it seals, but then when I go check it a week or so later, I find out the seal has broken, and I see it all full of cloud, like it's all gone cloudy. So what it's doing is fermenting. So this is going to be the hardest thing. Do not throw those out. Do not. Keep them. Let them sit there for 6 weeks, and what will happen is all the fermentation will go on the bottom, and you'll see all the cloudy stuff on the bottom. And those are the best pickles you will ever eat.
Lots of people are making fermented pickles.
That's right.
We're not talking about fermentation in this workshop specifically, but I thought we'd give you a little hint around that one to get you started. I think fermentation is like a whole other workshop, you know? There's so many different things you can ferment and ways that you can do that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. The only thing I ferment is sauerkraut. I make sauerkraut and I ferment it and then I can it. And the reason I can it as opposed to leaving it in the big crock pot is I make enough to last me 3 or 4 years. So I can it.
So Diana said for me to talk about the boiling water bath canner here in our kitchen, because we are selling our products commercially. We do boiling water bath can things, and we do that to help eliminate any chance that bacteria got in there. All right. Diana, do you want to talk about the pressure canner quickly before we move on to the jam video? So we have a little video that you're going to put up. Are you set up? Rachel's going to get that ready, and Diana's going to talk about why a pressure canner versus the boiling water bath canner. In a boiling water bath canner, we have a special one. You'll see it in the video. You want to make sure that these are submerged, that they are all the way under the water, and like Diana said, not tighten the rim completely, so there's a chance for air to evaporate in there. So we do that, but Diana uses the pressure canner for a different reason. When things are not high in sugar or acid, you need another way to help prevent having a hard time.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Okay. So I'm a big believer in the pressure canner. So this is the pressure canner. This pressure canner is well over 40 years old. Once again, we bought it, and it's worth its weight in gold. You cannot put vegetables in water, just water, without using a pressure canner. You will not get botulism from any fruit or anything like that, but you will get botulism from vegetables. Could get. Sorry. Could you hand me the beans and the soup? Okay. So here are 2 things that I do pressure can. I pressure can all my soup. So I make a lot of soup when things are available, and I pressure can it all. And then we do all our beans and potatoes, small potatoes, all that kind of stuff we do in the pressure canner. So there is no vinegar in here, and there's no vinegar in here. Vinegar is your preservative in your dill pickles and your dill carrots and all that kind of stuff. So
salt, a little bit of vinegar, the acid and the salt can help.
That's right. That's right. So I use this pressure canner quite a bit. And again, I like to do 24 jars of this, last me 1 or 2 years. I don't want to be making the same thing all the time. So I like the pressure canner. The reason why a lot of people won't use pressure canner is they say it's going to blow up. It can't blow up anymore because they have all these safety belts. Okay? If you're really interested in learning how to pressure canner, I would love to teach you how to do it. I'm a firm believer in the pressure canner. So like I say, all this soup. And if you're going to pressure can a medley of things, you have a book, you have a guide. It says, you know, it's always usually 10 pounds of pressure for 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Corn is 95 minutes. Pressure can corn is 95 minutes. So if I had corn in here, I got carrots, onions, and if I had corn, I have to do this the longest time of the vegetable season. So I always look it up. I still do that for all these years just to see what my time is. So if you're going to do carrots, potatoes, and all that, you've got to look to see which vegetable needs the most time. Okay? And the only thing I'm going to say is if you pressure can or you can, or your kid's going to show you jam, if you do anything like that and the seal breaks, just take it, put it in the fridge, and eat it first.
Eat it right.
Eat it right.
Or if you
Okay?
have too many that don't seal, you have to give them to friends and tell them to eat it.
That's correct.
That's what we talked. I think I mentioned that in the jam. It's Rachel and I talked about. So we're going to pause here and let you all watch our strawberry jam making video, and then we're happy to answer questions. We have some resources we want to show you at the end.
Great. Everyone just hold tight for about 30 seconds while I switch devices.
A demonstration of how to make strawberry jam. So the first thing I wanted to do was show you all of the equipment that I have set up. Now you might not have all of this equipment in your kitchen. I'm really lucky here at Roots because I have a commercial kitchen that I'm able to provide all of these things. But I'm going to walk you through what we have and talk to you a little bit about that. Now, the first thing I have on my right here is the boiling water masticator. It's the last thing that we're going to use today actually, but it just seems to be the first thing that I have on my right. And it is the thing that we're going to use to process the jars when we're done to make sure that we kill all of the extra bacteria that we might have put in during the process of making the jam. Mind you, I started with cleaning my hands. I didn't tell you that first. So today we have measured out 5 cups of strawberries already. We have our sugar measured out. I have a little treat for you using some butter, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Something you should know about me is I am not an expert strawberry jam maker, although I have made a little bit over the years, especially in this kitchen. And today we're going to use the syrup packet. You can buy these at any grocery store, and we're going to use the recipe that comes right in there, so that will make it easy for you. The next thing you'll see here are our rings and our seals. So we have rubber rings, or rubber seals I mean, for the center of your jars, and then the rings to go around them. And you can see I have a bit of hot with water already. We're going to warm those seals up later to make sure that they also don't have any bacteria on them. Every good kitchen needs a good potato masher. Today we're going to use that to your sugar. So we have the sugar all measured out, and like I said before, we're just using the Certo jam instructions, and then I'm going to slowly add that in. There's a lot of sugar. So you can buy other kinds of pectin or and then you can make them with less sugar. So that's an option for you. Sugar is used in the preserving process to help bind the water. When we bind water, that decreases the chances that bacteria can get into the product, and that's why you can hold it on the shelf for a long time. So that's one of the reasons that sugar has been used over the centuries. If you don't want that much sugar, you can play with that in your recipe. It might not always gel up the way a jam does, but maybe you're quite happy with a strawberry sauce instead of a strawberry jam. Now what we're going to do is wait until it comes back to that hard boil, a boil that we can't really stir down. All right, folks, so we've been stirring and waiting patiently, making sure that the sugar won't burn until it reaches a rolling boil. And you can see I'm still stirring vigorously, and the pot is still boiling. That means it's time to turn off our stove, and then I like to take the pot right off of our stove. And now our job is to be very patient. So the goal now is just to stir. We want the fruit to be dispersed evenly through the liquid so that we can prevent this thing we call floating fruit. And I have a nice example of that. So the floating fruit, as you see here, the fruit is all at the top and the jelly is at the bottom. So if we stir it well, that will be prevented later on. So we're going to take a few minutes to do that and just stir it every couple of minutes, give it a little break. Set your timer on your phone if you have a phone, or if you have a timer on your stove for 7 minutes, and just keep stirring it nice and slow while you do that. Another thing you can do, especially if you haven't remembered the butter trick, I like to have the spoon ready with some cool water, and then I'm just going to go in here and scoop off the foam. And then I use the cold water to rinse my spoon, and I'm going to do that all the way around the outside. So take a few minutes to do that, and then give it another stir. And when your 7 minutes is up, we'll be ready to can it. All right, you guys. Well, our jam is being stirred off. We want to make sure that we have everything ready to start jarring the jam. So I mentioned at the beginning that we have the seals, so the rubber lid, and then the ring. So I have them in a pot of water. I am not going to boil them. I want them to just boil so it really starts to degrade the rubber. That used to be the train of thought. We used to do that when I first started canning 20 years ago. I would do that. But we're just going to warm them up and try to sanitize them a little bit. Another trick that I often do is I use this nice hot water to sanitize my ladle right at the beginning before I start. And it's really nice to have a plate for your ladle. And also, if you haven't had one of these, I do the same thing. I have to roll it in the warm water just to give it a quick sanitize, and then it's nice to have a plate to set it down on in between. Now I mentioned that I'm lucky here in the commercial kitchen to have a sanitizing dishwasher. So for me, I was able to wash these with hot soapy water, these jars, and then run them through the sanitizer. If you're doing this at home, which most of you are, you probably don't have a 90-second cycle sanitizing dishwasher at your disposal. So what you want to do, there are two trains of thought. Some people will use an oven. I have never been super fond of the oven method, but lots of people like that. A boiling water. So if you have a pot with boiling water, the idea is to submerge the bottle in there for 10 minutes to sanitize them and leave them there until you're ready to wheel takes the air out. So just like the sugar helps bind the air in the products that you're making, we want this to vacuum seal. So that air stays out of it, and if air stays out of it, then mold usually does too. So you can see I use my hand tool magnet tool to grab the seal. Now I have the ring. I like to hold it down in the middle just to keep it centered as I screw the ring on. And then I'm just going to set that one aside until I fill all of the other ones up. All right, so our boiling water bath scanner we had going while we were getting all of the jam into the jars. Our next step then is to put it in. This is where our fancy tools come in handy. You grab your jar, blow the lid with these, give it a pinch, and then plunk them into the boiling water. Now something you want to know is once they're all in here, we want them to be submerged. We want the water to go over top of their little heads. All right, and the reason for that is we want to kill any bacteria that might have gotten in there during the process of the canning. So you need a little less water than you think, because once they go in, the volume gets displaced. But actually, I don't have enough water in here right now. So I'm going to have to boil the kettle and throw a bit more water in to make sure that it boils right over the top. All right, so when your 5 minutes is up, your timer's gone off on your stove or your phone, you're going to lift these guys up. I like to use an oven mitt. Carry them. And I like to set them down on a cloth, like I mentioned before. What you want to do is leave them there for the night. Leave them for 24 hours to sit. And then listen for the pop. I already heard the first pop. So you're going to listen for the pop, and what's happening there is it's sealing. So most of your mason jars will have a little lip on the lid, and you want to see that sink down overnight. You want to leave them nice and still while you're waiting for that. And then, as long as they seal, if they're sealed all the way, then you can store them for quite some time. However, if they don't seal, put those ones in the fridge and eat them right away, or give them to a friend. And enjoy.
All right.
I got some pretty weird things.
All right. A few more seconds for a computer transition here. We are back. Oh. All right, so if you have any questions, please add them to the chat and I will read those off. But if you wanted to talk about books for about a minute or two while those questions.
I just wanted to show you a couple of things that we thought about while you were watching the jam video. One is about jars, brine, and books.
Okay, so I just want you to realize that you can use non-canning jars. This is not a regular canning jar. This probably had dill pickles in it or something like that. As long as the disc and the ring will fit, you can use them because they're all commercial and they've already been processed from the company. So I use a lot of non-canning jars. Also, I just wanted to let you know that there's leftover brine here. We are not going to throw it away. We are going to take it. I save all my empty vinegar bottles. I mark them all. Then I pour this and it'll say dill on the empty vinegar bottle. And then I just keep it in when I need it with the next batch. And the other last thing I want to tell you, when you're making fruit, you're going to preserve fruit. I know you can go in the books, these wonderful books, and they'll tell you the amount of sugar to use. I don't use it. I do use sugar. I found when you didn't use sugar, the fruit was flat. So my syrup is 4 cups of water with just 1 cup of sugar, or 4 cups of water with a 1/2 cup of honey. So that's my syrup.
Or 1-1. That's what we do here at Roots Harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. We just had a few books that we wanted to showcase. Diane has a couple that she was going to talk about.
If you're just starting off, the Bernardin book is a really good book. I do recommend it. It's pretty basic for you to start off with, and it also tells you, what to look for. If this didn't work, what could be the problem in that. So I do recommend the Bernardin book.
And the Bernardin website. So if you are not a book buyer or a user, we live in this world now where some of us just go to the internet. Bernardin is a great source, and they have some really nice PDFs too for like low acid foods, which are the ones that use that pressure cooker we were just talking about, versus the high acid foods, which are the ones that you would use the boiling water bath. And they walk you through those steps too, which is really cool.
Great, maybe I'll check it out.
Maybe,
for all these years.
maybe not for you.
And the other one I wanted to say, I would say I'm a professional preserver or canner. And someone one year gave me as a joke this Jams, Jellies, and Preserves for Idiots. And this is one of the most wonderful books I've ever had. And I
Also,
used
because it has lots of great recipe combinations.
Yeah.
Diana and I have been making things in this kitchen. She comes in to do some cooking demos, and there's great recipes in there. So if you're looking for inspiration.
yes, it really has really good combos. So those are my go-to books.
Nice. And my go-to book, I also have Bernard in an older version than what Diana has here. I also had Foodland Ontario. This is also probably from the 90s. It's super old. From when I first started my career as a dietitian, I was teaching people about canning at Foodland Ontario. But this is the book that when I finished my nutrition degree, I worked on a farm for a summer, and I spent, like Diana does at this time of year, I spent full days canning all day to put food by for the winter. We had a giant food cellar, and we were feeding 20 people a day. And so this was the book that I taught myself how to can with. It has great lists of things, like I was mentioning before. If you were canning an individual vegetable and you want to start freezing it and you want to blanch it, or how long it goes in the boiling water bath canner, and it separates it out for all the different vegetables with a variety of different methods for putting food by. So that's where the inspiration came from for the title of today's workshop, from my history with that book. There's a couple more on the table here too. I'm not as familiar with these ones. They're ones that we have in our office, but there's lots of great resources out there.
Perfect.
Questions? Any questions come up there, Rachel?
Not yet. So we'll hang out for 45 seconds. Or a minute. I know sometimes people just need a break with sound. So if you have any questions, please add them to the chat box now.
Just one question that was asked earlier is how to make spicy carrots. I do a dill or dilly carrot recipe. If I want to spice it up, I just add a half of dried pepper in it. You can do, that's the way I would spice it up. Just add another spice or something.
Or like the red pepper flakes like we have.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've used cayenne in the brine. So a little cayenne pepper, if that is something that works for you.
Yes.
We also had another question. We'll field the last question that we had that came in advance. If there's no questions, I'm looking at Rachel at the moment. The other question was about getting the seeds out of your jam. And Diana says if you're taking the seeds out of your jam, it's jelly.
I have heard of people taking the seeds out of raspberry jam and having just the pulp, like just the flesh of them. And I've also heard them curse a lot when they do it. So me, if I was doing it, I'd just make jelly. I would just go to jelly. Jelly is quite easy to make, and that's what I would do.
I would say eat the seeds
Okay.
because I'm a dietitian and there's fiber in them.
Do you make dill beans the same way you make dill cukes?
Yes,
Basically exactly the same. Laying your jar on the side.
Yes.
So you can filter the beans in.
but I use a different recipe. You cannot use the same recipe for dill pickles, dill carrots, or dill beans because every vegetable has a different level of acidity in it. So you have to adjust your recipe to match the vegetable. Also, in my dilly beans, I put in black pepper and a few other little things in it just to make it a little bit spicy. Yes, you can.
And the same with the carrots here. At Roots Harvest, we use a little more spice in the carrots. And then when we do beans, we do a little bit of sweet. Or beets, I'm sorry. Yes, we do a little bit of sweet. Yeah, but they're all delicious. All great choices to put your food.
We have two questions. Could rubber seal lids, in addition to rings and jars, be reused?
That's an interesting question. Absolutely, they can be reused in your home kitchen as long as the seal is in really good shape. So if that rubber seal is in good shape and it continues to seal, you can use it. But in my kitchen here at Roots Harvest, I can't reuse them because I can't sell them.
That's right. So yes, I do reuse my discs, and I have brand new discs, use number 1, use number 2, and then I've got pressure pan. So almost all old discs will make it through the pressure pan because it's just so much heat. So yes, I do, but again, like Kim says, if you're going to sell it, you need to use the discs.
And then eventually when they stop sealing, it's time to throw them away.
That is correct.
Or use them to store your herbs, like I did. All of the jars we showed you with our herbs were also in mason jars, so use them for that.
Can you repeat how long to heat the jars once you've put the lid on to ensure a seal?
Good point. So it's the same as all the things. Everything has its own time. So I mentioned that I use the putting food by to give me an indicator of how long it should go in the boiling water bath canner. So every vegetable or fruit, like a jam, will be different than pickled bean, for instance. So you need to look that up.
So it has more to do with the fruit or vegetable you're preserving, not how long this rubber itself needs.
No.
Okay.
So, and again, Kim does hers with hot water bath because she sells it from here. I do all mine from the oven. And so usually what I do with my oven, it's at 225, but that's what I sterilize the jars at. I usually, as I'm taking them out and filling them, I put them back in again. And they're in there for a minimum of 15 minutes at 225. That's the minimum. My best way of doing it is have it at 225, set the timer for 10 to 15 minutes, turn the oven off, and walk away. And then they seal.
And it's really fun to hear the popping sound.
That's right.
I noticed you made a really funny face in the video.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, those are the questions we have right now, and it's 4 o'clock.
So you
So,
want to tell them about the website and the YouTube video?
yep, this recording will be sent. Will be available on YouTube, and the link to that will be sent to all of you once it's available, along with a couple of the brine recipe and a few recipes from today, and the titles and authors for each of the books that have been mentioned. So all of that will come in an email to everyone who registered for the webinar.
Thanks to Rachel for that, because she's the one organizing all of that and putting it together. And thank you to Rachel as well for organizing this webinar and the extra technology that went with doing some demonstrations in the kitchen. And thank you to my guest, Diana, for coming in and bringing her years of knowledge and expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure always.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon. You got a thanks from Amy and Tarina. Thank you. It was lovely and very informative.
Are we off? Awesome.